Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kundali Hari Radha Madhava Jaya Kundali Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kundali Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Bhakti Janapalava Jaya Giri Varadhari Jaya Bhakti Jai Gopi Janapalava Jai Giri Hare Krishna, Krishna
श्री हरिनाम प्रभु की जय, गौर भक्तवृंद की जय, गौर प्रेमानंद हरि बोल। So, Pranam, all of you, welcome. We will begin with Mangalacarana as usual. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnanam Jana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namashrishtam Manumapi Satriputram Atra Sharupam Rupam Tasya Grajamuru Purim Matharim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhik Madhavasam Prapto Yasya Pratitha Gripaya Shri Gurum Tannatusmi Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah Nikhila Shruti Mole Ratnamala Diti Nirajita Padapankajant Haji Mukta Kulairupasyamanam Paritashtam Harinam Sanchayami Anarpita Charim Chirat Karunayavatirna Kala Shamarpaitamunnataj Palarasan Savakti Srim Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sundipita Sada Hridaye Kandaresh Purato Upasachinanda Ajanulambita Buncho Kanakavadato Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Taksham Vishwambaro Dviyavaro Jugadharmapala Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataram Ladini Shakti Sarupaya Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namastate Ye Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Radhe Vrindavane Namrita Vahini Kripaya Nijabhavja Dasyanmayam Pradiyatam Bhaktya Bhina Aparadha Lakshay Kiptashchakamaditarangamadhe Kripamai Sharanam Prapanam Vinde Namaste Charanarabindam Vinde Namaste Charanarabindam Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Sri Gaur Nityananda ki jai, Sri Brajanath Haladar ji ki jai, Sri Nrsimha Bhagavan ki jai, Gaur Bhakta ki jai, Gaur Praman. So, Pranam, good morning. Welcome to all of you present in different layers of reality. And today we are having our second meeting here in Kansas, and we have a morning Q&A. Today is a very auspicious day, also very many celebrations we are having today. We are celebrating Sri Baladev Rasa Yatra. We are also celebrating Krishna's Rasa Lila Basanta Rasa, Spring Rasa Lila, which is described by Jayadev Goswami, Gita Govinda. We are also celebrating the appearance day of Sri Bamsi Badana Thakur, an associate of Mahaprabhu. Also, we are celebrating the appearance day of Sri Shyamananda Pandit. We are also celebrating the appearance day of Sri Radha Kunda that we will be speaking about in the evening. And we are also celebrating, although it's not mentioned in the Gaudiya calendar, Hanuman Jayanti, which is the appearance day of Sri Hanumanji.
I didn't know that.
So Ram Lila also is appearing to the picture today. So as you can see, there is a day quite loaded with celebration, very blessed occasion. So anyhow, in the evening we will be speaking specifically about the appearance day of Radhakunda that has been selected topic for today in the evening. But in the morning we have been chosen to open for questions if you may have in connection to whatever topic, whether to other celebration we are having today or to whatever topic you may have. So for those present physically here, for those present online here, if you have any questions, you can share them. Those online can share them in the thread and they will appear here, or you can share them live. Alita Saki has some question.
About my reading. In Chaitanya Bhagavat, just before Mahaprabhu takes sannyas, and Mother Saci is very distressed. Mahaprabhu comforts her by saying, in the past, you've been my mother many times, and he says Prishni, and then I can't remember the order, Diti, Kushalya, and then Devaki. And I was wondering why, being that Mahaprabhu is the fullest expression of Krishna in the form of Mahaprabhu, and he chose Devaki, who Yashoda is the fullest expression of motherhood to Krishna. So I was just wondering, is there a reason for that?
Okay. So just in case those online have not fully heard the question, I briefly will repeat it. So Lolita Shaki Dasi is asking here, Dasi, important part, as she always remind me. She's asking something in connection to what Mahaprabhu tells Saci Mata before he's accepting sannyas in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, in this case, where basically he's comforting her by saying, please, I'm always with you. You have been my mother forever, basically, but maybe we can say for many times or forever. We know that this is not that they start to be, Krishna starts to have a mother at some point, and before that he was orphan or something. And he mentions some of those appearances, if you will, of her, Prishni and Kaushalya and other descents of Bhagavan with his corresponding mother. And the question is that Mahaprabhu eventually says Devaki, in connection to his appearance as Krishna on earth. So the question is, well, if we consider that Mahaprabhu is the ultimate face of the Absolute, or the most, if you will, graded version of Krishna, with all that it implies, why Mahaprabhu mentioned Devaki and did not mention Yashoda, which is more, of course, tied to this idea of the full face of Krishna corresponds with the full face of Vatsalya, Sakya, Madhurya, and so on, and the full face of Vatsalya will be Yashoda in connection to Braja Krishna. Why he said, you have been Devaki, basically. That's in brief the question, how to understand that. So there are a few ways to understand that. The typical one that many of our acharyas will mention is that Devaki is a name for Yashoda. Just to give a very straightforward, simple answer to that. That is mentioned in the Puranas, and Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, in different parts of his commentaries on the Srimad Bhagavatam, on their commentaries on the Srimad Bhagavatam, when in some occasions the name of Devaki comes, and again it seems not to fit with the narrative of Golo, of Vrindavan, and say, why Devaki and not Yashoda? And they quote, I do not recall the exact verse here, but there are not only one, but a few verses from the Puranas that mention how one of the names of Yashoda is Devaki. So we could immediately, I will say that may be the main answer to the question. Actually Mahaprabhu is referring to her in that connection. Of course, we can also say that Devaki, as Krishna in Mathura, is an expansion of the Krishna in Braj. I mean, in our Gaudiya conception, of course, there are different conceptions in different lineages. Some will think that Krishna was born actually in Mathura and was carried to Vrindavan and was adopted, if you will, there and lived there. But in our tradition, we will say, no, Krishna was born in Vrindavan. The Goswami's comment on the Bhagavatam, and an expansion of him was born in Mathura. The two of them appear simultaneously. And when the Mathura Krishna was carried by Vasudev to Vrindavan for the exchange, we know, actually that form merged into the Vrindavan Braja Krishna, who already was born as with a twin sister. But the original one, if you want to call it, Braja Krishna, Krishna's two Bhagavan Swayam. So we could say as Mathura Krishna is an expansion of Vasudev, of Krishna in Vrindavan, sorry. We could say Devaki is considered as a Vatsalya expansion of Yashoda, if you will. So in that sense, still he's referring to Yashoda by way of speaking about her expansion. If we want to take Devaki not as the name of Yashoda, but as Devaki per se, still that's not, of course, untrue. That's real, but it's speaking more in terms of Yashoda's expansion in Mathura, if you will, in the form of Devaki. which somehow could be tied or connected with the sannyas lila of Mahaprabhu. No, it's right. In this moment, Mahaprabhu is about to accept sannyas, which is a lila which has more Aishwarya to it than Krishna's, than Mahaprabhu in Navadvip, Nimai, Vishwambar. Krishna Chaitanya is more like Aishwaric section of the lila. So one could say, again, there are different possibilities. Our Goswamis, when they comment on the Bhagavatam generally, Sanatana Goswami in particular, he has this style of, he gives like some, okay, this word of this verse, whatever it may be, means this, or it can be mean this, or it can mean this, or, and there are many or. So he kind of opens, it's not saying this is the only possible meaning of that, no. So there are different considerations, also considering different moods and different devotees that will see the lila with different lens, and each of them need to be, as we spoke yesterday, accommodated. No? They have to be placed for all of them. So the verses of the Bhagavatam, the revelation of Shastra, lends itself to be read with different eyes. I mean, it doesn't mean it can mean anything, but there is place for different interpretations, and all of them are correct as long as they remain in certain Siddhantic parameters, perimeter. No, so one could say, okay, Mahaprabhu is. One could say the two things. No, one could say Mahaprabhu is about to accept sannyas, which will be an Aishwarya lila, but in order to keep the intimacy with his mother, he's referring to her as Devaki in connection to Yashoda. No, he's invoking Devaki as the name of Yashoda, because for Saci, okay, Nimai may accept sannyas, but for her, he's not a sannyas. He's her Nimai in one sense. No, so for her, the Vatsalya are always, how nice my boy, or whatever he does. He's God. How nice my boy became God. No, something like that. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes that point. That's the psychology of that type of affection. So one could say, okay, he's calling her Devaki as a name of Yashoda to insist on the inti the two of them have, even if he becomes a sannyas, which is clearly established after he accepts sannyas. And as we know, he's tricked by Nityananda Prabhu to go to Shantipur. After he accepts sannyas, he wants to run to Vrindavan, and Nityananda says, okay, let's go to Vrindavan, I take you. And he makes the whole arrangement for Mahaprabhu to be tricked and go to Shantipur, the place of Advaita Acharya, which is close to Navadvip. So the Navadvip basis can have one version of him now as a sannyas, and Saci is included in the equation there. And as we know, Mahaprabhu sees her and he's not behaving now as a sannyas, Sri Kirtana, he's not behaving as ashparically towards her mother. He say, oh ma, and he falls at him saying, what madness I have committed. I have accepted this sannyas in a moment of dysfunctionality. But if you tell me I leave my sannyas now and go back home, no. So Saci say, I would like that, but I could not tolerate what other people may say if you abandon your sannyas. No, this Krishna Chaitanya is a mama's boy or something. No, so we know how it all converges. She's serious. Please go to Jagannath. It's another room in the house. I will get news from you and so on. But my point is, Mahaprabhu is behaving not aishwarically towards her mother, even after acceptance sannyas. So what to speak before acceptance sannyas, when he's trying to comfort her and give support, he to reaffirm, you are my mother. No matter which form it takes externally, Krishna, Chaitanya, sannyas. So you are my Yashoda, if you will, no? With the Devaki as the name of Yashoda. Or again, that will be our main take as Gaudias, because we tend to think, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur will say, when Mahaprabhu will leave his sannyas and return back to Navadvip. We are not worshipping Mahaprabhu in the altar here. He's not with the danda and so on. No. If he has a danda, Nityananda to him will take the danda, will break it in 3 pieces and throw it to the river. Something like this. No, we don't like that. I mean, not against the sannyas. I mean, I'm a sannyas. It has some purpose. It has some utility on some relative level. Nonetheless, it's not an eternal prospect. We are not projecting ourselves to worship Mahaprabhu as a sannyas, we are not projecting ourselves to worship Mahaprabhu as sannyasis ourselves. No, I mean, that's not my eternal goal, to remain a sannyasi, if you will, for eternity. So it's important to also bear in mind the relativity of it, but also the importance of that, importance of Mahaprabhu's sannyasi lila. So, the main, again, reading of this section for us Gaudiyas will be, Devaki means Yashoda, and Mahaprabhu is emphasizing this heart of motherhood that Yashoda represents even above Devaki, and trying to comfort her in this way before his sannyas, as we said, after his sannyas, and even after that, as we know that Mahaprabhu sends messages to Saci saying, "How nice was that shak you prepared, that preparation, and I tasted that." So to confirm, because Saci was offering these things, and all of them will disappear, and in her pain of separation, she may think, "I'm going mad. I thought I cooked something, but I actually didn't cook anything, and maybe I offer to the deity an empty plate. I have to cook again." She cooked again. So Mahaprabhu will send the confirmation, no, you cooked, and it was so nice that the plate remained empty, and this was what cooked. So constant, as a sannyasi, generally, again, you don't expect the sannyasi to send letters to your mom and say how nice would you cook, but he did. No? So he remained Sachinandan. That's a special name that we like from Mahaprabhu. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami takes quite a lot of time to glorify, while explaining this Anarpita Charim Chirat verse that ends up saying, Hridayes Purato Vasa Chinandanaha. Appears the name of Chinandan explains the glories of how dear that name is. For us Gaudiyas, how dear that name is for Mahaprabhu himself, how dear that name is for Sachi. No, Sachi Garba Sindhu Harindu, Samajani Sachi Garba Sindhu Harindu says Mahaprabhu was born from the ocean, up from the womb of Sachi, which is like the ocean, and Mahaprabhu is like the moon, Gaur Chandra being born from that ocean. So we will tend towards, we are biased in that direction. But again, if someone may have some more Aishvaric lens, one could say, okay, Devaki has to do with the expansion of Krishna outside of Vrindavan and the corresponding expansion of motherhood outside of Vrindavan, which is somehow connected with Mahaprabhu's taking sannyas, which has to do with Krishna's going out of Vrindavan, Mahaprabhu going out of Navadvip, accepting sannyas. So there is a corresponding Aishvaric manifestation of motherhood there, and he's invoking that particular name. But again, that won't resound for us that much. No? But we share just the possibility for those who who may have that particular affinity. But yeah, we will tend to go to, no, Devaki means Yashoda.
Guru Maharaj actually gave a class on this a number of years ago. I don't know if you remember that. Anyway, he gave a class on that, when Brahma blessed, was it Krishna Garba and Sutapa? And because I think somebody asked him about that, and he, right, and how that austerity and that blessing could result in becoming Devaki. It was a very interesting kind of class, but he seemed to indicate that I can't remember exactly, but there was some kind of merging of, right?
Yeah.
Hari Bol, Prabhu, just in time.
Yeah, basically that's described as they kind of merging with the eternal associates of Bhagavan in Golok in the form of Devaki, Vasudev,
Yes.
and themselves being personalities more connected with the heavenly planets, but having that particular desire and entering into the bodies, if you will, of Devaki and Vasudev.
Right.
But yeah, making it clear that of course Devaki and Vasudev are always Devaki and Vasudev. Nanda and Jasoda are always Nanda and Jasoda. Right. Because even because it may seem weird, like, oh, they became them. So before that, there were no Devaki, and also they were engaging in austerity. So of course, to attain the position of being Krishna's mother and father is not just about doing austerities, but it's all about bhakti. And of course, they attain that merging, if you will, by mixing that tapasya with Bhakti, because as over and over again is stated in Shastra, even other processes separate from Bhakti, be them austerity or yoga or jnana or karma, need the presence of Bhakti for them to bear fruit. So there has to be a mixture and presence of Bhakti in that case for that to bear such a fruit as well. So I hope that helps.
Very much, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there's any other question. I'm giving priority to the ones physically present here. I have some few questions also here online, but
I had a quick question.
the question may be quick. I don't know the answer. Let's see.
You brought up the idea of sannyas, and I know Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj reinstituted sannyas. So how important is it for the sadhakas to, I guess it would be the men, to think of it, to take sannyas? I mean, this is me asking a sannyasi this question.
Yeah, no, I recently.
That'd be a very loaded question when I was a brahmachari, by the way. But I think it's less.
So I repeat briefly the question here. Here, Indra Prabhu is asking that I just mentioned about the relativity of the Sannyasa-asrama, not downplaying its importance, but also in putting everything in the scale, and now mentioning how we are not, our eternal prospect is not in the Sannyasa-asrama, be it in Golok Vrindavan, be it in Golok Navadvip either, which lends itself more to think, okay, there is, as Gurmaharaj will say, sadhaka siddhavumi, you are at sadhakas, maybe you can be a sannyas, but we don't hear that window of opportunity. So what's the place of sannyas, how important it actually is, how to think. I actually, in reply to that, I will say something, but I will also share one recent talk that I interviewed, a podcast that I was interviewed by one devotee, two devotees actually, Jai Jagannath Prabhu and Karuna Avatar Prabhu. We made a whole podcast basically on that topic. I mean, the title itself was "Has Monasticism Reached Its Shelf Life?" So, so in the context of that, we spoke about the thing. I'm saying that because there you will find like extended answer of almost 2 hours, which I may not be able to give now, but I'll share some brief words and maybe of what we spoke there. So yeah, Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, he reinstituted the Sannyasa-asrama in the Gaudiya community. And I think it's important to, as much as we appreciate that, it's also important to understand the background of that decision, if you will, which was the situation at the time. And to do that properly, we need to really take the time to travel in time, and really do a historical research, if you will, because if not, we won't be able to fully grasp the climate of the time, which was more than, at least almost 100 years back. So, the world changed so quickly, especially in these times, as our Guru Maharaj used to say, before some things will change in 1 millennia, that same degree of change now is happening in 50 years because of how things are developing and rushing. So to travel in time 100 years is almost just like, when sometimes I say to the devotees, when I met devotees, still there was no internet, and for them it's like Treta Yuga or something like that. What?
True.
And it was just 20 years ago. So what to speak 100 years ago? It's like dinosaurs are there or something. My point is, we need to really sometimes take the time to enter into the details of the psychology of the time, the society Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was living, the challenges in the Gaudiya community at that time. That's not something we can just grasp in 5 minutes. To fully understand why he did what he did, and to fully understand how much we should continue doing what he did in those terms, on how much the climate of the times is maybe totally different or considerably different, and we may need to consider some other types of adjustments. Still, I'm not saying anything in particular. I'm just framing the reply. So, as you may know, at those times in India, to begin with, he was in India. So one thing is India, one thing is the rest of the world. Of course, he was in India, but West was in India in the form of UK. So there were some influences, but still in India there was some considerable prominence of the Varna ashram sensibilities. and this Brahmin status in society, and so on. And on the other side, we have the Gaudiya community, as we know. I mean, all of you may know this, but we have Gaudiya communities generally not. Our ideal is not so much emphasis on Varna ashram, basically. Varna ashram is there, of course. It's not something to fully dispense with, but it's just like a relative thing, if you will, to have our physical, mental, emotional nature in place, so we are balanced in our humanity, so we can project to our vertical growth, transcendence practice. So at that time there was some influence in India of the Varnashram, but most of the of the influence was quite distorted, not like just attached to a form, not to one's own nature, but just making business with that, and so on. Long story. And the Gaudiya community was totally into those who were renunciants, were Babajis, and they were in their own bhajan kutir. They were like in an active campaign of dissemination. I'm not criticizing that, I'm just mentioning that. And generally the image of the Gaudiya community in the eyes of society at the time was not basically the best. No, they were seen as some people like, and there was so much in big numbers bad examples of that, even coming from the renunciants that were making such an emphasis on Bhakti so powerful that you can even have moral lapses and it's no problem, because Bhakti is very powerful. So, and yeah, Bhakti is very powerful. And yes, you can have moral lapses and Bhakti is very powerful, but you can take that as an excuse to just over justify your moral lapses, and that actually becomes aparat. So lots of that was happening. So even renunciants, so-called renunciants in the Bhakti, in the Gaudiya tradition, were not given the best example under this type of discourse. So gradually they became more and more, I would say, irrelevant in the eyes of society. Gaudiyas were seen like a bunch of irrelevant people who justify things in this and this way, but in the eyes of society and the relative considerations of what does it mean to have a standing in society, Gaudiyas were seen like basically outcasts, if you will. Like, although our ideal is beyond caste, if you will. So Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, as you know, was instructed by Thakur Bhakti not to activate the dissemination of the message in the world, in society. So he needed to do some adjustments. And one of them was the Sannyasa-asrama. Not only the only one, no? The introduction of the Upavita, also Brahmin thread, and the establishing of the Vaishnava status above Brahminhood and all this type of thing, which were, I mean, we cannot fathom here now how revolutionary was that and what agitation it created in the environment. And he was, of course, ready for that. He understood the necessity of that, and he was dealing with that a lot, as he was saying in the motto of the Gaudiya Math, totalitarian war against illusion. That was his stance, basically. So Sannyasa-asrama was one of those adjustments, because he realized, in general, in our tradition, the Tyagis at that time were Babajis, which actually were Babajis not even in Shastra. It's just like someone who is beyond Varna ashram altogether and absorbed in their own practice, but not so much engaged in dissemination work. Although, interestingly, we see that previous to Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, Thakur Bhaktivinoda, he accepted Babaji in the last years of his life, although at that time he was much more immersed in his own practice and not so much in writing and disseminating like he did as a Grihastha. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur spoke about two types of devotees. He said the Goshtyanandis and the Bhajananandis. No? So sometimes it is very generally translated as Goshtyanandis are the preachers, the ones who find Ananda Goshtyanandi in Gosta. Gosta means like other people, reunions, meeting with people. Yeah. And Bhajananandi are those who find their Ananda in Bhajan, in more reclusive life. So sometimes this has been connected with, okay, Bhajananandis are the Babajis and Goshtyanandis are the sannyasis. But when Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that, there were no sannyasis in the Gaudiya tradition. There were only Babajis, and of course, married devotees. So when he said Goshtyanandi, Bhajananandi, he also was hinting someone can be a Babaji and can be mostly absorbed in his own practice or her own practice, or also can be someone who is sharing the message. It's not that because you are Babaji, you cannot preach or something like that. Just clarifying that. But Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta considered, let's take another step in that sense, and he reintroduced the Sannyasa-asrama, which is part of the Varna ashram, as we know. It's one of the 4 ashrams. So again, he put the Brahmin thread again, so it has to do with Varna. On this, so here we introduce elements also in consideration of the Varna ashram sensibilities of the time, like Sannyasa-asrama, like Brahminical thread, all of which were not included before in the Gaudiya tradition, because again, Vaishnavas are not concerned with Varna ashram basically, but Sarva Dharmam Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam. But Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta made that adjustment very tactfully. But again, it's an adjustment. No, it's not. What do I mean with this? Of course, if someone like me has a nature to live a life of a monk, is an important adjustment that I need to enter into to be balanced in my psychology and vocation. But it's not the all in all. No, it's not that because I am sannyasi, I'm necessarily more advanced than someone who is not a sannyasi. No? So it's important also to not confuse ashram with adhikar. It's not that if you are in one ashram, you are necessarily higher than someone who is in another ashram. No, it's not that if I am a sannyasi, I'm higher than Srivas Pandit, who is a grihastha. I'm not. I'm giving an extreme example, but there are so many advanced grihasthas. So, I mean, all of them are ashrams, stages in life or situations. I mean, ashrams can be seen as stages in life, but also ashrams can be seen not necessarily as stage in life, but a certain situation in which you can take shelter, ashraya, ashram, and not necessarily you have to pass through all of them necessarily. No? I mean, again, for many it may be the case, but not necessarily. I mean, if you are a grihastha and you are fully Krishna conscious, and you are literally speaking, seeing everything as Bhaktivinoda Thakur did, this is not my house, it's Krishna's temple. This is not my wife, it's Krishna's servant. These are not my children, they are Krishna's devotees, and I'm serving them. I mean, he's not neglecting his responsibilities, but he's seeing all this in a transcendental way. So technically speaking, it's not that you need to reject that at some point in your life. If you are having that eyes, of course you have to have those eyes. In most cases, maybe that's not fully possible, and that's why some may take eventually some distance from certain family dynamics. But again, these are rules that in each case will apply differently. No? I mean, whatever is favorable and unfavorable for one stage, that has to be taken. I mean, we are not concerned with being sannyasis. Sannyas is not the goal of life. Krishna Prem is the goal of life. So whatever situation takes you in that direction best, that's the criterion, basically, not sannyas or not sannyas. I'm saying this because sometimes sannyasis, and I speak as a sannyasi, are like over, how to say, idealized, like superheroes or something like that. No? And it's not that one may be more advanced than some people or not, but the point is still one is on practicing devotee. One may have its struggles or tests depending each person, each case. So again, our goal is not sannyas. Mahaprabhu himself saying, "Nahabhi prona chanarapatin napi vaishyana." So I'm not Brahmin, I'm not Kshatriya, Shudra, Vaisya, sannyasi, brahmachari, griha. Although he was a sannyasi, technically speaking, but he said that verse, "I'm not a sannyasi." So that means, yeah, on a relative social level, he followed the sannyas dharma very strongly, but in the heart of hearts, he was not ultimately concerned and identified with that. No? So that what I mean is a relative adjustment. So Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta made that adjustment, introduced a certain even color that were quite contrasting with everyone else wearing white, trying to create a teachable moment, take the attention of the public. So, and it worked very much. He had these 21 sannyas, if I'm not mistaken. But interestingly, he only gave sannyas to those who were born in Brahmin families. So still he retained some social consideration. He didn't give sannyas to everyone and anyone, but only those born in Brahmin families. no? Like still paying attention to what's called lokavichar or the public opinion. No? It's not that he was controlled by that, but he was trying to, he was engaging with the world. So he was trying to be revolutionary, but maybe not as revolutionary that make disturb instead of inspire. So he did these adjustments. So, and I share in this podcast with the devotees that recently I was speaking with my Guru Maharaj, and we were considering, okay, Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta did these adjustments at that time because of some of the Babaji section was relatively misbehaving as one of the reasons, not the all in all. So he introduced sannyas, but also in time we have seen many sannyasis misbehaving. So we were speaking, maybe reintroduce Babaji. So for a time we were considering, no, should I give you sannyas or Babaji? I was open to anyone, no problem. Trying to go to it. And Babaji is something that is not so, it has not that much pratishta. Pratishta not as something bad, but pratishta is just positioning. Like sannyas is sannyas, Maharaj, and all these titles like Sripad, Bhakti, this and no, Maharaj, Swami God, which I'm not criticizing. It's just like it has some plan in mind when creating all that Aishwarya. There is Aishwarya, as we spoke before. Mahaprabhu Sannyas is an Aishwaric leader. So that Aishwarya is meant to create a teachable moment, and the sannyasis has to know how to deal with that also internally, as to not be like, how to say, not carried by those waves and just think, whatever, I'm who knows what. No, so and keep in mind what's the purpose of this strategy, if you want to call it, adjustment. So, and of course, eventually my Guru Maharaj concluded, no, I'll give you sannyas. Because sometimes maybe giving Babaji may be too much for the Gaudiya community to digest. And I'm trying to share some ideas with the community that already they are ruminating on that, and it's taking some time for them to digest. So if on top of that, I take out the sannyas and give you Babaji, it may disturb the audience too much, and they may not even able to digest what I already trying to give. But of course, I personally do not think that sannyas should be cancelled or not cancelled. But my point is, there will be always someone with monastic tendency, although it may be 0.01%. But those people need to have their place, if you will, whether it takes the form of sannyas or eventually Babaji. Because Guru Maharaj also told me, I give you sannyas, but who knows, maybe in time I give you Babaji. I changed my mind, and whatever is practical for the situation. No? For example, my Guru Maharaj, as you may know, he doesn't give the upavita. He doesn't give the thread, generally. Of course, you may ask, why do you have the thread then? And that's an interesting point. He doesn't give the thread because he considers the thread that Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta reintroduced at the time had a lot of social connotations. Again, you are in India, they see the thread, you are a Brahmin, they recognize you by those symbols. But if you are in the West, wearing a thread, it won't change too much. It won't create maybe a teachable moment. People may even think, what's that weird thing you have hanging on your... we are not criticizing that. My Guru Maharaj keeps that because Prabhupada gave the thread to him. So and he also said, you can also keep the thread, because in Nitya Navadvip, we will project ourselves to be Brahmin Kishores, Brahmin boys. So there we will have a thread. So you can keep the thread as a meditation on your ultimate identity in Nitya Navadvip. So again, there's place for keeping the thread with some conception. There's place for taking that out. And of course, when Guru Maharaj gave me sannyas, I said, what do I do with this? He told me, oh, you are sannyas, you go to India, people see you, and if they see you without the thread, there may be to disturb you, keep the thread. Okay, thank you. The most important thing is the mantra given in Diksha. Now, the thread is more, again, like a social symbol, but in the West, it has no application, technically speaking. No? So, again, sannyas, the cloth, whatever items that surround the sannyas order also have to do with some relativity and social circumstance. So sometimes in time we should be able to rethink how much this is applicable, how much this is actually being favorable, or it's just like copying a formula without thinking too much about it. So whether it be sannyas now or any other thing in time. It's important that we as members of the community are always able also to separate the relative from the absolute, the details from the principles, and to always reconsider the details, how much the details are in place or need to be replaced in time, because so we remain relevant. Basically, if we are especially engaging with the world, how relevant we are in our presentation, whether it may be cloth, varna, ashram, words you use, the terms, whatever. Because that can happen. No? You can just niyamagraha, what Rupa Goswami said, no? Like following certain things without knowing why you are following them, just out of custom, out of whatever, social pressure, who knows what.
Just one little comment about your dress.
Yeah.
When you came to the clinic the other day there, I had told the ladies there that there's a Swami coming. And when you walked in, they were like, I mean, there was a visible intake of breath. They were like impressed. It was a teachable moment. I could see that. So I could see that you wearing that dress is actually a good thing, even in the West. And even, I wear a Brahmin. In fact, Guru Maharaj gave me that Brahmin outfit. I remember, being examined before and people asking me, what is this? And it creates a teachable moment. It doesn't embarrass me in the slightest to tell them that I'm a Vaishnava and I took that particular initiation, So
there is place here for all those considerations, But I also have seen devotees getting overtly identify with the thread and giving more importance to the thread than to the mantra, and identifying themselves more as Brahmins than as bhaktas. Right. So sometimes the other emphasis is also required. No, it depends on every case, but as you mentioned, there is place for all the things which are still relative to have a role to play in a positive way. And yes, that's why I keep this cloth basically every day, because also I like, it's not just it creates a teachable moment for others, but also it creates a teachable moment for me. It reminds me about who I am, who I want to be, how I would like to represent my guru, my tradition, but also keeping in mind, again, this is not the all in all. I don't know. Sometimes devotees get extremely attached to the how do you say, to the shade of saffron, to the specific variety of saffron, and oh no, Maharaj, this is not the legal one. The bona fide saffron is this one that has to look like the color of the tongue of the cow, whatever. Each one has their own, and it's like, come on.
It's like dangerous saffron, more like brown,
So at one point it's relative. And Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, although he established saffron, as you may know or not, before that he made some experiments with other colors. So first he dressed his sannyasas in black, like Christian priests, with the white, how do you call it?
Dog collar.
So like that, and then he tried green at one point. He likes green a lot. That was his favorite color. And eventually he stuck with saffron. But my point is, again, there's some relative background to that, trying this, trying that, what works better, and taking some elements from even Ramakrishna Mission and Ramanuja, Sri Sampradaya, in order to configure some of the aspects of the sannyas. So it's important to know, not over absolutize those things, because I've seen sometimes, even to the present, that type of over absolutization of the details of the Sannyasa-asrama and losing sight of the spirit of it, basically, which is the same spirit that's in every other ashram ultimately. No matter you are sannyasa, grihastha, brahmachari, we want to converge into the same goal. So I think that's an important point. So that's a summary of that interview.
I have to say, I was struck. I did listen to the podcast, and I was struck by a comment that Jai Jagannath made. He said that he has seen now in the second generation that they have no respect for sannyasis whatsoever. They just consider it a joke. So I thought that was,
of course, not all of them.
No, not all of them.
But I agree with him. I agree in the sense that I've seen that, and I understand why. Also, I'm not even criticizing those devotees, but I know that many of them have seen so many things in the name of sannyas, that they are like, oh no, thank you so much, or mistreatment they themselves receive by sannyasis, or people on the name of sannyas leading a lifestyle which is not very much aligned with the simplicity and renunciation and humility of the Sannyasa-asrama, or many possibilities, so many. Again, I'm not just over justifying that, so okay, keep hating sannyas, because it's not about the Sannyasa-asrama in itself. It's about your bad experience with a certain persons who happen to be in that order, but there is place for finding other varieties of sannyasis that may be more aligned to that. So yeah, that kind of happens. And I thought that we were speaking that with Jagannath, that in the beginning it was like one side of the pendulum, which was like high over idealizing, and the sannyasi is a pure devotee and recently descended from Vaikuntha, whatever, superhero and whatnot, and those sannyasis somehow receiving all that type of worship and so on, and not being able to deal with that. And eventually we know things that happen. So from that side of the pendulum of over idealizing to the other side of the pendulum, which is, oh no, Sannyasa-asrama is a joke, is a way of living, receiving money and traveling for free, and who knows. So sometimes happen that you go to one side of the pendulum, and the reaction to that, if you didn't have a good experience, you jump to the other extreme. So the conclusion was, hopefully after these two movements we can get to the middle point, which is to not be naive as to over idealize anyone just because of the color of the cloth, but also not to become cynic, as we spoke the other day, to just distrust whomever comes in that dress, if you will, and to be open. There may be people who are doing that nicely and sincerely, and as with any other ashram or groups, you will always find not cheaters even, but people who were not able to live up to the standards. So I think that's a generational thing that also may take time for those persons to gradually open themselves to the possibility of something else apart from those two sides of the pendulum. And I feel that that's going on already. That I've seen new devotees who are gradually like healing their wounds, if you will, and being open to there's place for that to happen. So, but those processes take time sometimes. So one should give the time they require, not just like pressure and so on. And again, it's important to understand history, to understand the present, why this is happening. Anyhow.
Yeah, it feels like Prabhupada was the bridge between Bhaktisiddhanta and today. And Prabhupada really imported the Gaudiya math for some degree or another to the West, but then he realized he had to make adjustments like giving women Diksa, that type of thing, so he made adjustments. So we moved away from the Gaudiya math model, and now we're moving further away from the Gaudiya math model. Not hugely, but somewhat away from there, where we have deities here and little temples all over the place, and we're still trying to practice properly, but we have jobs and stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing. Now you have some model that has worked, and I think I mentioned that the other day. For whatever the model that Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta established in Gaudiya math, let's say it's a model, if you want to call it as such, and it worked for the time, and it came from a very powerful personality. So so sometimes you can follow a model as such, even one or two generations after all that person who founded that, although the model is out of date. But it was coming from such an empowered person that on some level still the model works. Not fully works in every single sense, but it works on some level. So you may feel it's still working. We see the results, temples, people, whatever. So you continue reproducing that model 2 or 3 generations after, although it's reaching its shelf life, if you will. But it's coming from such an empowered person that the empowerment extends through the times of that particular person to 1, 2 generations. But at one point you will have to realize it's no longer operative, and we need to update some details of the model. Again, it's not that change the model means stop chanting or something like that, but the details of the dot. Now, the principles will always be the same, but the details. So sometimes the model is reproduced in the details, still work, and that can happen with Prabhupada also, or some other empowered personality who established certain way of doing things according to Desha Kala Patra, time, place, circumstance, but in time that should be updated. Now, one thing is to say Srila Prabhupada said, and it's okay, but also it's important to say what Srila Prabhupada will be saying now, and to see if he will be saying the same thing regarding any topic, or in some cases yes, in some cases no. Of course, he will be continue saying Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That won't change in time, but relative adjustments, he may have another idea. And of course, what Prabhupada will be saying now, that pertains to what Parampara, his successors are saying now, his disciples, his students, what the students are continuing with the flow of Parampara, and they are like revealing the vision of their guru and their guru and their guru. That's how the tradition remains alive and again relevant. Because if not, we run the risk, and I mentioned that briefly in the introduction to the book, we may run the risk of ended up being as a bunch of irrelevant fanatics. I'm not saying everyone is like that, but that can happen with any tradition, not only with ours.
Also,
sorry,
loses a goose. Fanatics on one side, and people are just pretending.
Yeah. So many risks are there, and we need to keep them in mind to know how to deal with them.
This actually brings up an interesting point, and that's the role of the guru, because it seems like in these remote communities, there are less and less people getting initiated, but they are following something. I mean, it's like they're trying to follow, but I mean, how does that work? Is it just that receiving initiation is just going to be something that is a kind of a rare thing, that there aren't going to be that many initiated boys, or do you just have to bend over backwards and just find a guru kind of thing?
I mean, you are asking this in connection to second generation devotees? No, not specifically.
Actually, for instance, here, there's, like Gopi has made many devotees, but very, very few of them have taken initiation, simply because there's maybe no access to a guru per se, or whatever, so it's just like, what is, I mean, is it that we have a very strict standard, and unless you meet that very strict standard, because I even heard Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj just gave Harinama to certain, they would just give Harinama. Narayan Maharaj, heard, even Prabhupada on one occasion at very place just asked the whole Indian community that happened to be sitting there, do you want initiation? They all came up and gave him Harinama. So I'm just trying to think, what is the standard, for
there are different standards, as you know. There's not like one single thing, and of course I cannot speak for, I don't know, for the local situation here or any specific situation, because
I'm not even thinking.
Every situation is so different, and I think that of course it's important to make those who get closer to our tradition and are involved in it, would like to be involved, to have that clear, that the principle of guru is very important. No, it's not something that you can, dispense with, and you can have it or not have it. It's the same. No, it's but also at the same time make it clear that this is not something to rush and to obtain cheaply, because also you can see that not people wanting to have a guru. Like, I want to have a guru, but it's not so much I want, but as once Gauranga Priya said, and she's a second generation devotee, and she had been around the devotees all her life, and at one point everyone has a guru except for her, if you will, and she was like, but I'm not feeling this epiphany in one particular direction that I want to fully give me in that direction. And she said that she wrote an article, I remember, and that stuck with me nicely. She said, I didn't want to have a guru because I want to have a guru. I waited for the moment to feel I need a guru. No? Not I want, but I need. No? And I need out of the proper reasons also, because you can say I need because of who knows what. I need a psychologist, so I accept the guru. No, they're two different things. So I think it's important to give the people who come a proper education about the guru principle, the importance of the guru, not in a way that is, again, neurotic or discouraging for anyone. And also, I think it's important to, of course, it's up to the guru to adjust some details regarding giving initiation. Like my Guru Maharaj, as you may know, when he gives initiation, he asks the disciple, how many rounds do you promise to chant? He's not establishing one fixed number. He's asking according to the circumstance. Of course, sometimes the disciple may say, and that's being done in private, no? But I don't know, maybe I've seen my Guru saying, the disciple tells him in his ear how many, and he says, no, more. So it's not that you say whatever you like and okay, you are initiated. No, so that's also there. You follow. But also he's flexible in the sense that I've met many devotees who really get discouraged because they cannot complete 16 rounds per day, and they really get discouraged to the point of sometimes thinking, this is not for me. I can't reach that level. I cannot practice that, or they have some problems with the 4 regulative principles, let's say, and they become so discouraged to the point of I cannot be part of that, and it shouldn't be like that. If they are sincere about it, again, they're not looking for an excuse to continue in doing those things and be a devotee always. No, they will like to transcend that, but at the time, for some reason, whatever the case, not able to. So somehow there should be encouraged to continue practicing, which doesn't mean that necessarily they will be initiated at that moment. And also for me, that's an important point. Not necessarily everyone will be initiated in this lifetime, if you will. No, there may be many people who come to Krishna consciousness and become inspired, but for some reason, again, each case is so unique, they are not ready to accept a guru. I mean, they know the importance of that, they accept that, they are not against that, but still they have to solve some issues in their life before accepting that commitment, and that may not happen again in this lifetime. And that's not a problem if they are sincerely engaging in bhakti. That's my point. Of course, it's so important to have a guru, no? To engage in bhakti, in sadhana bhakti. Guru will instruct the disciple, but again, not everyone is coming with the same background, no, adhikar and so on. And so I was recently speaking with someone who was mentioning that about the importance of, I mean, the person was relatively old, and that person wanted to be initiated and was afraid, like, maybe I leave my body without being initiated. But the point is, that shouldn't be a concern, in the sense that it's not that because I got the initiation, I have the warranty that I'm going to Golok, and I don't have initiation, I'll be born as a pig or something. I mean, if you are sincerely engaged in bhakti, bhakti will take care of you. Neha vikramanasasti pratyabhayana vidyate salpamapyasya dharmasya trayati mahato vayat, Krishna saying in the Gita. In this path, there is no loss nor diminution. Whoever is seriously surrendering to it will be protected from the greatest danger. So we shouldn't forget how merciful Krishna is, how much he's really taking care of his devotees. So for some reason you are not able to have a guru in this lifetime, but you are sincerely projecting to that will happen in time. It's important that we develop this vision beyond lifetimes, no? And see a continuity beyond one lifetime, another lifetime, because it's not that in one lifetime probably everything will come. Like this devotee was asking once, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, how much does it take to attain full perfection in bhakti? If I am starting in this lifetime, which you never know, but let's say you start in this lifetime officially. And he said, he thought for a moment, say, 3 lifetimes. And the devotee who asked the question was shocked. No, like 3 lifetimes? Like it's a lot.
A lot.
He implied that, no, like he said 3 lifetimes, like in brackets, a lot.
Yeah.
And he was shocked, and Srila Maharaj was more shocked, like, is that too much? 3 lifetimes? To receive all that you are to receive after uncountable births and the Brahmanda, Brahmitika, and it's nothing. You should be ashamed to pay so little. Something like that, no? So some ideas in connection to that, no? But yeah, I think it's important to also, again, balance all the things. For some people in this lifetime, they may not be able to accept the guru for whatever reason, and that shouldn't be a problem if that's everything is sincerity is in place. And on the other side, we should downplay the importance of the guru to the point that, I don't know, we may end up promoting like some type of even big conception, like it doesn't matter if you have a guru, but you have Prabhupada and he's taking care of you. Or you can take a guru, but even if he fails or she fails, Prabhupada's still there. No? That's not the right mood to accept a guru. No? Already thinking, well, if he fails, no problem. No, I shouldn't. I should take shelter of the guru that I have full trust in. And that may take some time, again, especially in some cases where trust has been damaged in the past for whatever reason. You cannot force faith. No? Like, you have faith in this person, surrender to this one, trust that one. It has to happen. It has to be heart-to-heart connection and overwhelmingly clear for me that I want to give my life to this in this direction. So it has to be voluntary. That's the flavor of surrender. Surrender has to be voluntary. If it's not voluntary, it's forced, and that's what we don't want. No?
And then the idea of first and second.
Sorry?
The importance of first and second. I mean, it seems like that was part
What's
of my
first
question.
and second?
Harinama and Diksa.
Okay. That's a technically correct term.
Yeah. I just was thinking that it seems like Harinama is less commitment than Diksa, but I might be completely wrong in that saying that, because oftentimes you get Harinama, but you might never get Diksa. So then,
I mean, yeah, all perfection can come from Harinam. Technically speaking, Harinam is not different from Hari, as you know. And Nama Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Sudho Nityamukta Vinatam Namanam. Krishna Nam is Chintamani, it's like a touchstone that can give you anything, and it's eternally liberated, fully conscious, full of rasa, this famous verse, and non-different from Hari. And Srila Rupa Goswami on top of that says, but if you want to still make a difference between Krishna's name and Krishna, we can make one difference. And the difference is that Krishna's name is more merciful than Krishna. Only in that sense they are different, but they are totally the same. So my point is, everything can come from Harinam, but at the same time, not everyone has the capacity of drawing that everything from Harinam. So Diksha mantras are said to provide a particular, if you will, frame and focus and meditation on Guru, Gauranga, Krishna, and of course, all of them include Krishna's name. That's an important thing. You take out the name of Krishna from those mantras, and you no longer have those mantras. Take Krishna's name out from the Gopal mantra, which is the most important Diksha mantra. Take the 3 names that are there out. The mantra is no longer there. No more Diksha mantra, no more effect. So it's still Krishna Nam is the active principle of that sound formula on the Diksha mantras. So my point is, Diksha mantras come to, in one sense, re-emphasize the importance of Krishna Nam, but they are presented in a certain way, in a certain arrangement of words and parts, as you know, the Diksha mantras have, the Gayatris in particular, corresponding to Sambandha, Videya, and Prayojan. And also speaking about Guru, again, Gaur, Krishna. So we can also take further advantage of our Krishna Nam. Basically, that's the idea. No? We chant our Diksha mantras in such a way that our chanting of Krishna Nam is like reinforced, if you will. We return to Krishna Nam with further depth in connection to Guru, Gauranga, and Krishna. So So yeah, I wouldn't say that, I don't know. Of course, if someone received Harinam and did not receive Diksha, I'm not saying this is an excuse. I don't care for Diksha. No.
Right.
But if someone for any reason did not receive Diksha, one should not go neurotic about, I only receive Harinam. No? So like, I need something else. I mean, if you can take proper advantage for Harinam, Nastiyeva, Nastiyeva, Nastiyeva Gatiranjata. No? Harinam, Harinam, Harinamaiva Kevalam. In this age, Harinam is more than enough. No? But Diksha mantras come again to assist. Srila Sridhar Maharaj will give this classical drawing. No? Yeah, this is the reach of Diksha mantra, small circle, and a bigger circle is the reach of Harinam. It's reaching even lower, no? to rescue us from who knows where, from the basement of our existence, to take us to the rooftop, the highest reach, basically. No? So, and this many mantras, no? Krishna mantra haite havis, samsara mochan, Krishna nam haite pavis, Krishna charan tritana charitam. It also say Krishna mantra or Diksha mantra is freeing you from samsara. Krishna nam is taking you to the feet of Krishna. So like always, I will always negate, it is this emphasis on the superiority of Krishna nam. But yeah, Diksha mantras of course are important and welcome, coming from Sri Guru, but again, not to dismiss the central importance of Krishna nam. So if someone received Krishna nam, my conclusion is, and took proper advantage of that, that person may have reached perfection without having received Diksha for some particular reason. No? There's possibility of that. No? Sri Harinam is independent of Diksha, that's stated in Shastra. No? But of course, again, I'm not saying with this that's don't care for Diksha, because at the same time, Nam himself wants to give his Krishna, he wants to give himself to us through his devotees. So if we transgress Diksha, somehow it's one offense to the Nam, Guru or Bhakti. No? You are neglecting the principle of the Guru, who is the one who gives Diksha. So again, all this is not to create an excuse to avoid Diksha or to avoid Guru. No, I just chant Harinam independent of Diksha. I can chant Harinam without receiving it from anyone. Some people may even think like that. Harinam is powerful in itself. But actually, if you are doing that properly, Krishna will take you to the feet of his devotees. That's who Krishna is. That's his style. That's how he likes to give himself to us, through his devotees. As we mentioned yesterday, Bhakti comes to our life through sadhu sangha, basically. No? Krishna comes to our life through sadhu sangha.
That's very clear, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. I don't know if there are any questions. I have like 10 here online, but I'm giving precedence to the ones present here.
I have a list.
Oh, okay, let's begin.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, to those connected online, I hope you understand my point that we are giving precedence to the one present here. You didn't want to come to Kansas, so sorry. Your questions will be at the end of the list, with all respect. Or you are in India, New Zealand, and so on. But just in case, if I do not get to address your questions, please save them with you, and in our next Q&A, or what in some Q&A at some point we will address them. At least one. Let's begin with the first one of the list. Or the one.
All questions about the nature of the soul.
Okay.
And if the soul is unchanging, what does that mean? I mean, what is our true ego, and what is, if the soul is unchanging, then how is it that something is introduced, or like the idea of inheriting something that's not already there? How can that happen if we are eternally of Krishna's nature?
Okay, so I will begin saying that it's important here to understand the word tatastha, which is basically who we are. When we speak about our nature, we are tatastha. We have heard that word, tatastha shakti or tatastha jiva. So tatastha, as you know, means sometimes translated as marginal energy, or sometimes translated as the line that is there between the beach and the sea, which in one way is not a line that you can put your finger on, because sometimes it's here, sometimes it's there, the water is moving, but there is some define, how do you say, like in between line? Yeah, whatever. So that's our constitution. Tatastha is not like a planet or something like that unto itself, because sometimes that's been mentioned that.
So
Yeah.
I understood that meant that we have the capability of being covered or not.
Okay, I was going that direction. That tatastha has to do with our potential or capability, as you may like to put it. We mean being covered or not. And when we say or not, means not only, or not doesn't mean not being covered only, but putting ourselves fully under the influence of Bhakti or Swarup Shakti, Krishna's Swarup Shakti. So my point is, yeah, the soul is defined as unchanging in the Bhagavad Gita, for example. There's one of the attributes of the Atma. The soul doesn't change. So, I mean, I made myself this question also when writing my book, and I tried to address that in one section. So if the soul doesn't change, how you can say, and also I'm kind of repeating your questions if in case it was not fully heard here. How can we say, yesterday we did not speak too much in detail about that, but you may already be familiar with some of the points of the book. If we say that Bhakti comes to our lives at one point, that we inherit, if you want to put it in those terms, or receive Bhakti, how that does not contradict the description of the soul as changeless? Because it seems that Bhakti enters into your life, it creates some change, some influence. So how you remain a changeless Atma before and after Bhakti coming into your life? No? So it's a pretty valid question. So again, I'm going back to the idea of tatastha, because we are changeless in the sense that, because the Bhagavatam also, and I addressed that, I cannot tell you the exact page, we can look for that, but the Bhagavatam also has some verses in that connection, the jiva is changeless. But the context of that statement mostly has to do with the soul is not affected by matter, in the sense of we may be under the influence of Maya Shakti, let's say, but it's not that that actually Maya Shakti touches the Atma. That's not happening. It's not that our constitution as Atmas becomes affected by Maya Shakti. It's like, as they sometimes Srila Prabhupada say, like water and oil. No, they do not mix each other. But by the influence of Maya Shakti makes us identify or think that we are whatever, body, mind, but actually we remain Atma. Now, technically speaking, Maya Shakti is not touching the soul. The gunas are not touching the soul, are just clouding our prospect. Like we spoke yesterday, we are distracted. No, like you are looking in this direction, but actually you are unaware of who you already are, and you identify with something else, but who you already are remains there. It's like you are, I don't know, you have an inheritance of $10 million and it's in one room in your house, but you are not aware it's there. So you live like a homeless person almost, but that's still there. It's not that changed because of your unawareness of that. That remains there. So that on one side. Now the context of those verses had mostly to do, the soul doesn't mix with matter, basically. Consciousness, spirit doesn't mix with matter. The soul doesn't mix with Maya, although it can become influence and cover. So, so what about the influence of Bhakti, the influence of Swarup Shakti? Does this not represent a change in the constitution of the Atma, and therefore the soul is changeless, supposedly. Again, this idea of changeless mostly has to do with
So that
matter.
made me think that it's already there if it can't change that.
Yeah, let me close the idea. I get your point, and yes, naturally, we'll go there. But the point is that we are Tatastha. So Tatastha means, technically speaking, Tatastha is that who we are, in one sense, depends on the environment we associate with. I know it may not be an easy idea to grasp, but our sense of identity is determined by the environment that surrounds us. So if you are surrounded by Maya Shakti, you will think, I am whatever, John, born in this country, and I'm a woman, and this and that designation. If I'm not under the shelter of Maya Shakti, the influence, and I am under the influence of Bhakti Shakti, another type of identity will come. I am, I don't know, a Gopa, a Gopi. Eventually, that may come. So that we are changeless means that our Tatastha constitution is never affected. But again, Tatastha constitution means it depends on some environment. So Tatastha means I need a particular environment to fully define myself. Under the influence of Maya, I do not define myself very deeply. Under the influence of Bhakti, I do define myself comprehensively. So the Atma is changeless in the sense that the Atma is always Tatastha. The Atma always has potential. We have a potential to embrace Bhakti fully. And in that sense, we do not change.
Natural for the soul?
Yeah. For the Atma, the most natural thing to do is to embrace Bhakti.
But it's not already there.
Exactly. But the potential for that is there.
Not be there if we're part of Krishna, and Krishna is love.
Well, what does it mean to be part of Krishna also? No? We are one aspect of one of his energies. And I think, of course, all this discussion has to be always considered in terms of what Shastra is saying. Of course, as you may imagine, I'm not trying to create my own theory about this, but try to share, okay, what's Bhagavatam is saying? Bhagavatam is saying, I don't know, Satsanga labdhaya bhaktya. Bhakti is attained by sadhu sangha. Bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya. Bhakti comes from bhakti. Muktim dadati karshishit smana bhakti yogam. Krishna easily gives mukti, but he does not easily give bhakti yoga. I won't torture you with quotes. All the torture is there in the book. But there are many verses that speak about bhakti yoga being given, being attained, being received, whatever, and very clearly. So, and the Swarup Shakti being the essence, Bhakti being the essence of the Swarup Shakti. That's say very clearly. And in Shastra, every time Swarup Shakti is spoken of, is as a separate category of the Tatastha Shakti. When Vyasadeva in the Bhagavatam, he's having his samadhi, where he's before compiling the Bhagavatam, re-editing it, he says Maya Shakti, then he says As Tatastha Shakti, under the influence of Maya Shakti, then he sees Swarup Shakti. He's not seeing them as inside the other one. He's seeing them, they are different departments of Shakti. But again, we are created, if we want to use that word, we are not created, but we are constituted in such a way that our most natural capacity will be to host Bhakti, to receive Bhakti. Our ultimate potential will be in connection to Bhakti. But it doesn't mean that it's inherent. Basically, that's the idea. No? For example, if we as Atmas totally freed ourselves from the influence of Maya Shakti, but do not put ourselves under the influence of Bhakti, like a Jnani, someone who follows the path of Shankaracharya, who wants to merge with Brahma Sayuja. You have heard about that possibility. I mean, it's not what we run after, but that's there in Shastra. The Bhagavatam say there are 5 types of mukti. Salokya, Samipya, Sarupya, Sarsti, Ekatvam, or Sayuja. And mukti means what? Liberation. And mukti means eternal position from which you can never fall, which is, of course, connected with other topics, because sometimes I've heard about the thinking that we fall from whatever, Golok, Vaikuntha, Vrindavan, but that's not happening. That's not in Shastra. And some people, again, can get free from the influence of Maya, but do not take to Bhakti, like the Gyanis do, and they attain Brahman, and they remain there forever. So my point is, if Bhakti will be inherent, what's going on with those people there, with inherent Bhakti in Brahman forever? How does Bhakti operates and express itself and so on? It's not there.
There's no covering for them.
Exactly.
No influence of the modes of material.
Exactly.
They're just.
Yeah, because that's the meaning of mukti. Muktir hitvanyatarupam swarupina vyabhyastitihi, says about them. Mukti means to be freed from the influence of the gunas, basically. If not, it's not mukti, technically speaking.
What is our true ego? If we're not covered by false ego, what is our true?
By ego, you mean identity, if you will?
Yeah.
It depends. Again, I can say tatasta. Tatasta is our identity. But the idea of tatasta also
like
speaks
Brahman,
about.
Are you just saying the soul is Brahman?
Again, sorry?
The soul is Brahman. Is that different? Or is that just like saying the soul is Brahman?
No, the soul is not
Soul
Brahman.
is-
Brahman is one, as you know, of the three aspects of the absolute. No? Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti sabdyate. The Bhagavatam speaks about Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And we are Tatasta Shakti. On one side, you have Shaktiman. I'm sorry if I'm using too many technical
isn't it
terms.
In the Gita, sometimes they refer to the soul as Brahman.
I mean, in
It's
Sanskrit, we have
spirit,
many.
spirit.
Yeah, I mean, in Sanskrit, we find many words for the same thing. No, so Brahman can refer at some points to one thing, to another. So it's all about which context is it appearing. Sanskrit works like that. If you take out context, we have no clue what's going on, or we can justify everything. So it's important to know which is Bhagavan is a word sometimes used for great personalities. In the Bhagavatam, Sukadev Goswami sometimes called Bhagavan, but it doesn't mean he's Bhagavan, supreme God, but great personality. So, but no, technically speaking, we are not Brahman. Although, of course, a Jnani in the Sankara Sampradaya will think that. That's a difference of opinion. But for us, someone can attain that type of mukti, which is not our goal, but can attain that type of mukti if they do not offend bhakti, and if they acknowledge there is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, but I want to go to Brahman. No. And they take to the appropriate practice and reach there. And there are many quotes in Shastra which show that it's possible. Again, it's not our goal, but it's possible. It's one of the three aspects of the absolute. And some people may be inclined in that direction because of particular sangha they receive, basically.
So if we are all individual souls, then are we different from each other? Is each soul different from each other soul? Right? So in what way?
Well, again, I know it's a complex topic, but we are atmas, individual atmas, but we are tatasta again. So our individuality has to do with the influence of a particular environment. No? Let's say in Maya Shakti, material environment, we find.
If you're not talking about the influence of the environment,
there won't be a sense of individuality there.
There won't be.
I mean, those who are in Brahman, they are not experiencing themselves as individuals.
Is it like when they merge into the body of Mahavishnu? That's Shushupti.
No, that's a different thing. That's when
they kind of met, but the individuality seems to disappear.
Yeah. But it's a different situation, of course. No, but yeah, we lose our sense of individuality in that particular situation. That's when the creative cycles.
More akin to what she was talking about, maybe.
Yeah, whatever the case, but the point is, Atmas remain individual for eternity. Again, someone in the Sankara Sampradaya do not agree with that. They will say, only Brahman is real, Brahman Satya Jagat Mithya, and the notion of Atma
So
is.
how is this different from an impersonal or a Mayavad philosophy if we say that all souls are the same? I mean, if they're
All souls are not the same.
so how
They reach a place in eternity. Those who access Brahman, they reach a place in eternity where they own the experience of their individuality is suspended. But it doesn't mean that they are not individuals anymore.
So then what is that experience of individuality? How does that manifest for one who isn't in that situation?
For someone who is not in that situation,
Yeah.
not in Brahman.
I mean,
In the Maya Shakti, the experience of individuality is what jivas experience in this world, conditioning sense of individuality. And under the shelter of Bhakti, the individuality experiences.
can you not separate, and can we not isolate the soul apart from the influences on it and say this is the nature of.
That's why I began with the word tatashta, because that's the very implication of who we are. Tatashta means you cannot speak about individuality without considering the influence of the environment. If you take that out, we don't have experience of individuality. And that's Brahma Sayuja. We
merged with everything?
No, we still remain individuals, but we don't have an experience of that individuality. I know it's quite abstract topic. It's not the easiest
Is it
presentation,
correct to
but
say that it's not possible for the soul to be without an influence? Unless it's
Brahma Sayuja.
unless it's Brahma
I mean,
Sayuja.
that would be in brief words. If you want to take out any influence of any environment whatsoever, you lose your experience as an individual. Although you remain an individual, but you don't have that experience.
So in essence, it's not possible to be
An individual without an environment?
Yeah,
Basically.
So what does individuality mean?
Individuality, I would say that to exercise our agency and capacity of will and interaction with other individuals, and of course
But
to
not
have.
necessarily any qualities.
Well, Srila Jiva Goswami mentions a good amount of qualities in the Paramatma Sandarbha. Yeah.
So what is that?
Of course, many of the qualities are the Jiva is eternal. Many of the qualities are the Jiva is changeless. The Jiva is, and lots about potential. The Jiva has the potential to know. The Jiva has the potential to love. So again, you can
potential to love, but no love.
Basically.
It's there.
Mm-hmm.
But they have the potential.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Love, as we understand prem, because you can speak about love in the world of Maya Shakti, but that's not prem. That's a very important thing to.
Would that be called desire?
To separate. Sorry.
Would that be akin to kama, desire?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Admendriya priti vamcha tare balikam krishnendriya priti cha dhare premanam. Says Chaitanya Charitamrita. Exactly. When your desires are centered around Krishna's satisfaction, that's called prem. Krishna's sense gratification, that's prem. When it's a circle around your own sense enjoyment, that's kam.
Could you take the word will and change it to desire? Would that be?
Again, sorry, could you?
The idea of will and change it to desire. In other words, the soul has the potential it desires things and creates karma because of that. Karma becomes karma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how it expresses its will through. I desire this, therefore this happens.
Mm-hmm.
So why I didn't come equipped with quotations, but why do you think in so many places Srila Prabhupada indicated that the love is there in the heart that's covered and that, is
Yeah, I tried that my whole second part of the book is an attempt to work, to deal with that and to think about that, because of course, and as I try to quote also in my book, Srila Prabhupada, not only Srila Prabhupada, but also other acharyas like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, and many others that I try to quote, they have not only said the things that you mentioned, that love is there and so on, but they have said the other thing as well in other parts. So that's an interesting situation. It's not only they say something different from Jiva Goswami, apparently, but they sometimes say something different among themselves. So how to understand that? I mean, for me, that was fortunately, I never was like disturbed about in my faith to Srila Prabhupada, to any of our acharyas. But for me, at least in the way I am, it's something I need to do something about. It's not just, it's okay, no problem. Achintya. Sometimes that word can be very dangerous. One god brother of mine made a comic recently. He made
it's emphatically impossible to have. So, and when I pointed this out to somebody, they were like, no way, because the GBC says we fell from Vaikuntha. Why don't they quote that?
Yeah, that's.
You see what I'm saying? So it ain't clear.
I know this.
It's confusing.
So no, it's okay. And again, I of course I'm quite aware of that particular situation also, that I also quote in my book, and also I go to this now. But my point that I'm trying to make is, okay, for example, Prabhupada say sometimes we fall from Vaikuntha, sometimes he say nobody falls from Vaikuntha. So it's not just, okay, let me pick the one who I like the most, or who is more comfortable for me, or the two are true at the same time, achintya. No. So the point is here, what's the Siddhanta on this topic that is already established from the beginning of the Sampradaya about the Goswamis? Because, I mean, that's the way to establish Siddhanta, basically. No? And if some of our acharyas may have said some different things, the two different options, we are to go to the original conclusion, and then we can conjecture about why possibly they may have said the opposite here and there. And we may never know why also. That's another thing. Someone asked me, why Srila Prabhupada said at times that we fell from Vaikuntha? I don't know. I mean, I can conjecture. I can tell you, maybe preaching strategy, maybe this, but I was not there with him. And he was telling me, Padmanabha Maharaj is saying this at this point because of this. I don't know. I won't be as bold as to declare, I know why he said that. I can think as much as I can why. But for me, beyond the why is, this is the conclusion. No matter why, we can try. That's a separate question, if you will. You follow? No?
What's a conjecture?
So in this case, it's similar. This is a separate question. Why Srila Prabhupada say, or why Bhaktivinoda Thakur say, which is a valid question, and that's why the second part of the whole book is about that. But the first part of the book is, this is the conclusion about this topic given in Shastra, and it's really consensual. I mean, it's not just a few verses. It's like all over. Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, all Puranas, and Vedanta Sutra, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Brihad Bhagavatam. Again, if you want to be tortured, you can read it and you see all the quotes. But going back to Prabhupada and to why he said, again, to begin with, he said the two things, and let me share some examples of the other not so well-known, maybe, things he said. So he said, for example, his purport to Chaitanya Charitamrita 1.468, only when the Ladini Shakti emanates from Sri Krishna and is bestowed upon the living entity to attract him, does the living entity become a pure lover of God? So that's one. No? Only when the Ladini Shakti that come from Krishna.
It's also semantics, right?
Well, he's saying Ladini Shakti. It's important to know the philosophy in this connection. Swarup Shakti is made of three aspects: Sandhini, Sambit, Ladini. So Ladini is part of Swarup Shakti. Swarup Shakti, Ladini is coming from Krishna. Swarup Shakti, then is coming from Krishna.
Maybe some degree of love there, but not Ladini Shakti.
No. Because Prem is the essence of Ladini Shakti. That's mentioned in Shastra over and over again. And Ladini Sambit Sandhini, again, is Swarup Shakti. And I quote in my verse, in my book, two sections of the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami. He quotes a verse from Vishnu Purana which says, Ladini, Sambit, and Ladini, Sandhini, Sambit, and Ladini, Tvai Eka, are only present in you, Bhagavan. And Sridhar Swami comments, they are not present in the Atma. So for me, that's like, okay, that's quite clear. No? And that's said by Jiva Goswami, who is the official systematizer of our Sampradaya in terms of Siddhanta, adding the commentary of Sridhar Swami, who is a very respected commentator accepted by Mahaprabhu. And they're saying these three ingredients, Sambit, Sandhini, Sambit, Ladini, which make Swarup Shakti, whose essence is Bhakti, they are inherent in Bhagavan, but they are not inherent in the Jiva. But again, we have the potential to embrace that, of course. So here Prabhupada is saying basically that Ladini Shakti is coming from Sri Krishna. He's not saying it's coming from us. So it means, and this is one ingredient of Swarup Shakti, of Bhakti, and it's bestowed upon the living entity. It's not that it's activated, but we are receiving that. So
Maharaj, the example there for just general preaching, Prabhupada would say, we are part and parcel of Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
You won't get so much into the details of the Swarup Shakti and the Jatasta. For general orientation of people to understand the philosophy, we are part and parcel of Krishna. And then Prabhupada would use the example of, again and again, the gold mine and the gold and the sea water and the ocean, just to give us an idea that we are samples of Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
And even he said in TLC, I think, if you want to understand God, Krishna is infinite. And what is infinitesimal? Infinitesimal, as when Krishna is infinitesimal, that is the Jiva. That's the TLC too.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you take it in a kind of a more broad comparison like that, well, then you could say, well, if we're part and parcel, if the ocean, in a minute quantity, couldn't then people start thinking that because we are part and parcel, sometimes we have also a little part of Swarup Shakti also. Why not? Because we're part and parcel of the Supreme Bhagavan as the Swarup Shakti. I am an infinitesimal aspect of that just as, so we could we not have it in a minute form within the constitution of the Jiva, because we are part and parcel of God. So those ways of analogizing lend itself to that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
If you don't finally dissect or try to understand in a very technical way, in a very broad way, it sounds like that seems certainly a possibility.
But
when you're one with God and different from God, quantity and quality and quantity, then we think, okay, quality, then I have all the qualities.
But also, again, for me, this is a general way of presenting the topic, and I fully understand why Srila Prabhupada did that. I'm not saying he was wrong or he was like cheating people or something, but for me also, it has a lot to do with what we spoke before. Try to travel in time and try to understand which scenario Prabhupada had in front of him to transplant the whole tradition to newcomers who didn't know anything about India, basically, or the only thing they knew was Ravi Shankar and Sitar. So you cannot just give everything from one chunk of. So he tried to give some examples, some analogies in this particular connection, but an analogy is not enough to establish Siddhanta, technically speaking. I mean, I can use analogies for proving, I can use the same analogy for proving one thing and from proving others. Sometimes they say the analogy of the of the seed. No, in the seed everything is there, but it needs the watering. So we have the seed already in our heart, so we need the water of sadhusanga, and the seed comes. I mean, I understand the analogy, but where is that in Shastra? No? It's not about quoting an analogy. Everyone can quote an analogy. In Shastra, what they say? Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. The Guru is giving the seed. So we are not having the seed. We can compare heart to soil. We can compare the heart to a seed and create that idea, but we can compare the heart to soil in which the seed is given and eventually bears the particular fruit of some bhakti, one bhakti or not.
Just say waking up.
Again, we can say many things, but the end conclusion, and that's the first chapter of my book, is we have to establish a epistemological hierarchy. I mean, how we as Gaudiyas establish Siddhanta in our tradition. It's not saying my guru said, my guru said. I mean, I'm not against saying my guru said, but my point is that's not, if I'm speaking with, I don't know, if I will be speaking with someone from the Nityananda Paribar or the Advaita Paribar, and we are speaking about establishing some particular point of Siddhanta. I cannot say them, my guru say this, so that's the Siddhanta. No, we have to speak about the common main text in our tradition and establish Siddhanta on the basis of that. Our gurus may ideally will represent that, but in cases may say something different from different purposes. But if we are to establish the Siddhanta, we are to go to the founders of the Sampradaya, if you will, who are the Goswamis. And again, even if you would like to say, okay, Maharaj, as Advaita says in the preface to the book, even if you would like to continue thinking, and I'm not in a campaign to convince people, I just read in the book because I felt the need to harmonize that in myself, and this is the best I can come up with. But if someone may choose or say me, Maharaj, I will continue choosing that part of what Prabhupada say, not even all that Prabhupada say, but that part when he expresses like we have love in our. Okay, I won't interfere with that, but still you have to harmonize all the other things that are said there. At some point in your trajectory, maybe this is not the moment, because I'm quite aware this book is not for everyone. I'm not trying to distribute that to someone who came 2 days ago to Krishna consciousness, maybe too much. But I met many devotees who are struggling with how to understand, how to harmonize all the things. And they found this very helpful. I mean, it was helpful for me. So I thought someone may find that helpful. So still those statements are there. And there are many. So for me, to be honest, there are many possibilities that I share in the second part of the book as to why Prabhupada may have said that. For me, he's mostly trying to indicate when he says it's inherent, it's not inherent. And sometimes it's what is inherent is the potential to obtain that, basically. So for me, and again, I may never know actually why did he say what he said, but that's the conclusion I've reached, and I feel that all these exercises have nourished my faith in someone like Prabhupada and all our acharyas. But I think, we need to open ourselves to for example, what you say, Ankota Prabhu, like, okay, we are part and parcels of Krishna. Yeah, but in which sense? Again, we are one aspect of one of his energies. It's not that like you say, the ocean and the drop. One drop has all the qualities of the ocean. No, the ocean has waves. Drop do not have waves. So in a general way, it has all the qualities of the ocean. In a specific way, it doesn't have all the qualities. I cannot do surfing on a drop. I cannot do even on the ocean. I don't know how to do that. But the point is, strictly speaking, the drop does have all the qualities of the ocean, all the attributes. It doesn't have waves and so many other things, sharks swimming there, whatever. So in one general sense, we are one and different from Krishna. But in a more specific sense, there is difference not only in quantity, but in quality also. Because Krishna has Swarup Shakti, we don't have Swarup Shakti. For example, Rupa Goswami mentions 64 qualities of Krishna. And he mentions only the first 50 are present to some degree in the jiva. He's not saying the 64 are present to some degree in the jiva. He's saying only the first 50. There are 14 more that are not in the jiva. So these are examples from Shastra that shows actually it's not that they have everything Krishna has in less quantity. There are even some things that I don't have, but that we can have in potential by associating with him. So again, I know that in the beginning that's maybe too much for certain devotees, and that's why I agree that all these topics are not for everyone. But at some point of our trajectory, we'll find those statements, and at least someone like me, I cannot just close the book and continue like the three monkeys. I have to harmonize that.
Just a couple of things, Maharaj, about
Yes.
the ability to love or to enjoy.
About the what, sorry?
Spirit, the enjoying spirit.
Yeah.
Krishna has the enjoying spirit.
Yeah.
That's manifested through Shakti.
Mm-hmm.
The jivas, even in a balanced state, we have an enjoying spirit.
Mm-hmm.
We want to enjoy, just like Krishna, we're trying to imitate Krishna. So the faculty, the facility of enjoyment, so that reflects Krishna's tendency to enjoy. Now, Prabhupada will sometimes say that lust is prema, but turned inside out.
Mm-hmm.
Prabhupada said that too.
Yeah.
So okay, in the material world, I have a tendency to enjoy, just like Krishna has an enjoying tendency. As a spiritual being, there's Ananda as a food of spirit, so to speak. So I have, even in the balanced state, I have that desire to enjoy. Now, for Krishna, are we saying that enjoyment is coming through or facilitated through Swarup Shakti?
Mm-hmm.
In what way then does a jiva, who is just maybe we are individuals, a spiritual consciousness, as part of Shakti, we are spiritual. Where does that tendency to want to enjoy, just like Krishna is enjoying, but we're trying to enjoy with the material energy, and so we call that lust. But if that lust is simply prema turned inside out, inverted, then somehow or other, even in the bound state, we have that, both a tendency to enjoy, and we have lust, which is prema turned inside out, so to speak. So
yeah,
how does that not say that we don't have that faculty of enjoyment, or desire to love, but reflected as lust? So we have that tendency.
Yeah, we have the tendency. We are individuals. So we have will, we have agency, we have desires, as we were speaking before, and that expresses itself in relation to a particular environment. That's in the case of Maya Shakti, we associate with Maya Shakti and our individuality. And of course, this is tied with another issue, and I don't want to get the thing even more complex, but which is the idea of anadi karma, which means that from time without beginning, we have been under the influence of Maya Shakti. So our tendencies to associate with the material environment are fueled by previous samskars of exploitation and enjoyment. But yeah, what's going on is our individuality is expressing itself in the context of Maya Shakti. So there are desires, and those desires take the form, as you mentioned, the desire to enjoy and so on. But for me, not for me, for Shastra either, doesn't speak that prema is inherent. No, and I understand again Prabhupada saying lust is prem turned inside out. Again, it's a way of trying to describe. Okay, you are trying to, but if you pay close attention to what's prem and what's lust, they are worlds apart. No, they're totally different. No, because one is totally self-centered, and the other one is totally based on self-forgetfulness in divine love. It's totally the opposite direction. Total dedication and given disposition, prem, and of course the other thing. So the fact that we express our desires in this world and we try to enjoy and so on, we could say it's pointing, if we will, indirectly to our potential. It's speaking about our potential for real love in connection to our source that we call Bhakti. So yeah, we can say what we exhibit in this world, as we many times say it and hear, distorted reflection of what's going on in Golok, let's say. but it's not necessarily saying that's inherent, no? The thing in Golok, if you will, but it's showing us which is our potential for that thing. But that thing, love, bhakti, prem, is in one sense diametrically opposed, 180 degrees to what's going on here. Because here is we think we are in the center because we are not in the center.
Prabhupada actually says that in the description in Rasa Dance, the third chapter there, he actually describes that exact thing that Maharaj just said, the difference between prem and lust. He says, yes, that the gopis had lust for Krishna, but it was prem, nothing to do with material lust whatsoever. Completely different thing.
Yeah, no, that's understood. I mean, the metals, different metals of metal, but silver and gold and iron are different. So
Yeah, you might eat them.
yeah. But the tendency, so that tendency to want to enjoy. So we talked about the constitution of an individual soul. So in the Sandarbhas, it says a soul. You're saying in the Paramatma Sandarbha, you're talking about the different. Jiva Goswami talks about the different qualities of the soul, Atma, and we may try to understand it as an individual, individual thing in itself, but we're saying because we are detached, we're always complected by our environment. But what about so the jiva, the jnanis who want liberation, to be free from any kind of environment?
They don't have a tendency to enjoy. Interestingly,
yeah.
So that's the point. We have our tendency to enjoy here because of the influence of Maya Shakti, and we be thinking ourselves the center and trying to exploit the resources of the environment. On one side, on the other side, again, we find in Krishna's enjoyment, which is totally of a different kind and nature, and we in that land we may enjoy by giving him enjoyment, which is a totally different type of idea from this side. But in between, we find those who attain, as we mentioned, Brahma Suyuja, and they're like mostly situated as Atmas without influence of environment. They're not experiencing basically enjoyment. So that speaks also that the Atma, devoid of all influence from environment, as Jiva was going to say, has the potential to enjoy in relation to an environment, but it's not necessarily in nature enjoying, if you will.
To do with the environment.
But the spirit itself, consciousness itself, is constituted of Sat Chit and Anand. Consciousness itself, and the jiva is conscious. We are conscious. We are conscious. Consciousness and conscious. So jiva has that. So it is Sat Chit Anand.
Yeah,
But the Ananda of the Jiva, and that's almost one chapter I dedicate in my book, doesn't speak about enjoyment. All the Ananda, as Jiva Goswami and Sanatana Goswami puts it, is basically a lack. Kshudrabad uses Sanatana Goswami. The Ananda of the Jiva is mostly a lack of misery, he says. The Ananda, because sometimes we say we are such an Ananda.
It's a 0 point.
And basically says actually that Ananda means that we are devoid of suffering in our constitution. It's not that much speaking about the positive sense of inherent pleasure or enjoyment. For that we require environment. But the Ananda of the Jiva, and I will...
The Ananda of the liberated Jiva, for instance, or the Jnani, is that the Ananda is that it's free from suffering, from the material clutches.
Yeah, so sometimes we call it Ananda, but technically speaking, like if you're suffering, and suddenly you are not suffering, you say, how happy I am. I say, technically speaking, you're not happy. You're just not suffering.
Isn't it that the soul is desiring, though? Is a unit of desire?
It has the potential to desire, but the desire is exercised in relation to an environment.
So
you don't have environment, there's nothing to desire because there's nobody that will be desired. There's no sense of individuality.
Philosophy that we're always desiring, whether it's material desire or spiritual desire.
Yeah, if you speak in terms of material and spiritual, but if you speak about no influence of material or spiritual environment, just again the intermediate.
So that's not the nature of the soul to desire.
The nature of the soul, again, that's the thing. No, we have to understand the terms. What's nature of the soul? Tatashta. So tatashta means your sense of individuality will be able to be expressed in connection to an environment. So you put an environment, whether be it Maya Shakti or Sarup Shakti, and you can have a desiring experience there. But you take out those two influences, and again, if you are in Brahma Sayuja, there's no desire because there's no sense of individuality. So who will be desiring what?
Then isn't it described that a person who's attained that can only stay for some time because of the desire within the heart for relationship
No.
with, I've heard that Srila Prabhupada explained like that.
Maybe at times he may have said something like that to emphasize anti-Mayavad, basically. But technically speaking, in Shastra over and over it says that once who reaches there is not coming back.
He said a few places that those people who attain Brahmananda, that they will they'll come back.
That mostly refers to
that they could ascend or they could come back.
But what will make them come back?
Mhm.
That will be the technical question. What if you attain, let's say, Brahman? What makes you fall from Brahman?
Well, what I've heard is that because we have the desire for relationship within the heart, we crave it. We crave love, and therefore we can only stay for some time in a desireless, what do you say, state.
No, technically speaking, it is mentioned that once you attain that platform, and again, there are many quotes to that effect, you reach a place where there's no fall. That's why called mukti. I mean, the very definition of mukti means liberation. So if someone falls from mukti, how much can you call that mukti? If you fall from liberation, how much that's liberation?
So it's just so-called mukti. They can some people temporarily attain that?
No.
Actually,
Someone can
that
someone can fall from the Jivan Mukta platform, which is not the same as Videha Mukti in terms of the type. Those who want to attain that type of mukti, you can become a Jivan Mukta, which means someone who attains the highest possible reach in this body, this lifetime, but who still has to wait for the prarabdha karma to expire in the form of leaving this body. And then that person attains Brahma Sayuja. But if that person who attained Jivan Mukti in this lifetime offends Bhakti, which can happen, that person can fall from Jivan Mukti. No? And that's what the Bhagavatam refers in this verse, Janyera Bindaksha Bimukta Maninas, Tvayastava Abhada Vishuddha Bodhaya Ruhya Kritina Paramparam Tata Tato Patantya Nadrita Jusmadangaya. This is a famous verse that generally is quoted to show that one falls from there. But if
Prabhupada would use that all the time.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the only verse he would use.
Yeah.
Substantially.
That's why I'm quoting the verse. But interestingly, the verse is saying Bimukta Maninas. It says who consider themselves to be liberated. So it doesn't mean it speaks about those who have not attained liberation per se, but who have attained a considerable proximity to that state while still in this body. So if they offend the feet of Bhagavan, they fall from that. But those who do not offend the feet of Bhagavan, they can enter that. And if you study the commentaries of Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Sridhar Swami, to that verse they confirm that.
Be attracted if they haven't offended Krishna, but they not.
Sorry again?
How can they not be attracted?
Cannot be attracted to?
Who?
Those
Muktas.
people with Jivan Muktas.
Because of particular association, and they have a particular samskars towards Brahman. Yeah, there's a very interesting explanation in one, I don't remember the exact verse. I think it's third canto, Kapila Dev. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes how the Jnani, even who uses bhakti as a means to attain mukti, how eventually even may have some realization of Bhagavan, but somehow makes a great effort to pull away that and to attain his his idea. And again, for us, that's unthinkable because we have been blessed by Sadhu Sangha, and for us, that ideal is, in the words of Prabodhananda Saraswati, he says, Kaibalyam Narakayate. He says, that type of liberation for us is hell. But why we say that? Because we have been blessed with this unique devotional prospect. But for those who have been through another experiences, I don't know, just suffering miserably in this world, and they enter in touch with certain practitioners of Gyan, the prospect of ending suffering forever and eternal peace is like, wow, let's go for it. And that's all they know, and they go for it for eternity.
Guru Maharaj actually gave an example about how someone could fall from Brahman by saying that if someone had a disciple, the Guru goes to Brahman, and that then his disciple then is blessed with Bhakti somehow or another, then that desire to liberate the Guru could actually bring him out of that. And I've heard that. That's the one thing that I have heard that says that you could, if by the desire of his disciple, he could somehow or another.
Yeah, he doesn't mention a disciple that much, but yes, someone who one had
something like that. Yes, transcendental.
Yeah, he has mentioned that as something that was mentioned by Baldev Vidyabhushan. I've tried to look for the quote. I've never found it, and I asked him, and we were not able to find. But even if, of course, the quote is somewhere for sure, that's more like an exception to the rule.
Yeah, it's an exception to the rule.
But of course, that's there.
Just going back, Maharaj, a little bit to the nature of the soul. So the soul is freed from material bondage, and it's you saying that the enjoyment, the happiness is conceived from the concept of I'm not suffering anymore, I'm free from suffering. What about the concept of Sarupananda, the happiness of understanding one's own Sarupananda? We talk about that. The different types of Ananda, Seva Ananda, Bhakti Ananda, Sarupananda. Isn't that what the liberated jiva is experiencing? That type of Ananda, Sarupananda, or just knowing.
I speak also. I'm sorry if I sound to refer too much to my book, but I have spoken about that in the third chapter. At least how we use that in our tradition, the term Sarupananda does not refer to us, but does refer to Bhagavan himself. And to the Jiva Goswami mentions that in the Priti Sandarbha. So Sarupananda means the experience that Bhagavan has of his own inner being, if you will. It's called Swarupananda. No? The Ananda he experiences in connection to his own Swarup. But he said that when that inner being takes shape in the form of different devotees, that's called Swarup Shakti-ananda. Bhagavan derives much more bliss by interacting in that connection. So in connection to the bliss of the soul, going back to us, generally that's most called Atma-ananda, not so much Swarupananda. I mean, it's a term, but basically there are different types of Ananda, which is an important point also, because sometimes when we mention this idea of Satchidananda, we kind of reduce the idea of Ananda to one single possibility, and there are so many actually degrees of that, like Atma-ananda, Brahmananda, Swarupananda, Swarup Shakti-ananda, which is another way of saying Bhakti-ananda, Swarup Shakti-ananda. So the soul devoid of all, again, covering, is able to experience Atmananda, which is, again, has to do with the inherent Ananda ingredient in the jiva, which is mostly connected to the absence of suffering in one's own constitution. Basically, that's what we call Atmananda. But it's, again, not a type of Ananda like Bhakti Ananda, which has to do with Bhakti entering into our lives, or Swarup Shakti Ananda, basically. So that's an interesting topic, fascinating ideas.
We've had an interesting class, Maharaj, but it's 12:20 something.
Okay, so yeah,
I need to start cooking.
Yeah, okay. So
Are you going to do that?
Okay, we'll finish here.
Yeah, I'm going.
Thank you so much for your presence. Sorry if I was not able to entertain your questions online. Please save them, and next session we may be able to do so. see you tonight. For those who can connect, in the afternoon we'll be speaking about the appearance day of Sri Radha Kunda. So we will jump into another direction, or not jump, hopefully not rush, properly immerse internally in that reality. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nityananda ki jai, Shri Brajanath Haladar ki jai, Shri Shri Balaram Rasa Yatra ki jai, Shri Krishna Vasanti Rasa ki jai, Avirbhav Mahotsav Tithi Srila Vamsi Badana Thakur ki jai, Avirbhav Mahotsav Tithi Shri Shamananda Pandit ki jai, Shri Avirbhav Mahotsav Shri Radhakunda ki jai, Shri Hanuman Jayanti ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandari. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti Vaishnava vrinda ki jai. Gaur Hari Bol.